Hi everybody, my name is Professor Steve Saladino. I'm from the College of Southern Nevada's Education Department, and this presentation is called Is Your Grading Scale Putting CSN Students First? I've given this presentation a number of times at Convocation and also at the adjunct conferences during the summer, and was asked to present it to you here. I wanted to let you know in advance that this is more of an information presentation than a persuasive one, but I'll let you decide by the end where it kind of lands for your particular class. It begins with asking you to think about your own class and posting letter grades at the end of it if your students receive these percentages in your class. Look at the four on the left-hand side and just in your own mind, tell me where would you assign letter grades for those percentages. Now, when giving this presentation in person, there's a lot of differences of opinion for the first three, and the only one that's really unanimous is 36% at the bottom. Most people in the room would say they would give an F. But I don't know if that's true for you, and so we have to take a look at kind of a typical student. This is a typical student I know, and one of the things that I wanted to mention about him is I started looking at his classes and his grading scales that he was taking advantage of at CSN, and this is what I uncovered. One of the important parts of it is he has no driver's license, so he relies on his parents for transportation, and probably most importantly that he lacks the navigation capital to change things that institutionally don't seem fair. So what if he didn't have a driver's license and he wanted to research DMVs to find out which DMV would be more advantageous to take his driver's test at? Well, instead of Rate My Professors, there's a Rate My DMV, and they find out that some DMVs didn't have a standard for some of the things that you have to do. One might not require you to parallel park. One might require you to use a manual transmission. One DMV might accept a passing score of 36%, while other locations require 73%. Now, nothing I'm about to show you has any relationship to the course content you teach, what ideas you present to your students, or how you assess mastery of that material. And I guess that goes and just says, I'm not infringing on your academic freedom. I would never do that. This is, matter of fact, this has nothing to do with really grading in your class. It's just the grading scale and how letter grades are applied. So let's take a look at what we do as professors or as adjunct faculty at CSN. At the end of your class in Canvas, your students get a percentage displayed to them in the default, and they look like this. They go out to the hundredths place, and then you as the instructor will take that information, compare it to your grading scale and your syllabi, and you'll go over to My CSN and you'll pull down a predetermined field that gives you letter grades, and you'll decide on what the letter grade is. My question to you is, where did your grading scale originally come from? Did you create it yourself? Is it something you remembered from your days in school? Did somebody in the department hand you a syllabi and you thought that that was the unified grading scale for the department? Or maybe your department does have a unified grading scale. What I want to do is kind of follow a flow chart here. So let's go back. You get your Canvas class and you get your percentages at the end, and the students' total points or percentage in the class are displayed. You go over to My CSN and you assign them a letter grade by the instructor. Now, I don't know, that is kind of where the professors or the teachers' impact stops, because now it goes over to the NSHE, and each letter grade is assigned a grade point value. So whatever letter grade you push in your class to each student, it's assigned a grade point value. Now, if you go to any of the institutions here in Nevada, you'll find the same grade point averages. You don't have to look at, strain your eyes there, I'm going to show it to you larger. But anywhere in Nevada has the same grade point averages assigned for each letter grade. And as a matter of fact, I researched most of the universities in the United States use the same scale. So whenever a professor in Illinois gives a student an A-, that gets the same grade point value at those colleges. Now, There's a few colleges in the United States that vary. Most of them are private schools, but for the most part, I'd say 95% of the colleges use the same grading scale. So here's CSNs. It looks like this. Whenever a grade is recorded, a grade point value is assigned. Now this goes on behind the scenes past what the instructor does. He just gives the letter grade, and now it's kind of up to the college to take over with the math. So for instance, on the first choice there on the right, if a student gets an A in the class and it's a 3-credit class, you multiply 3 by the grade point value of 4.0, and so the student would earn 12 grade points for that class and that grade. Go down the list, same thing occurs at a B, a C, or a D, and you can do the math in your head. It's not that difficult, and you'll see that those grade points go on to, that value is multiplied by hours to determine the grade points. The grade points are added to the total CSN grade points earned, and that's how a student basically gets their GPA. It's the aggregate of all of their grade points from all of their classes divided by how many credits they took. So let's take a look at a student. Let's pretend that they went for one semester here at CSN and they received those 4 grades, an A, an A minus, a B, and another B. The first B there, that student happened to get an 89.4% in the class. So if you take out all those total grade points, you get 41.1 grade points divided by the 12 credits, and their GPA for that one semester is 3.43. But what if a student took a class where they got the exact same percentages, but another instructor at 89.4 gave that student a B+? Well, the grade point value would change, it would raise a little bit, and the total grade points would change. And so now their total grade points would be 42 divided by the 12 credits, and now their GPA goes up to 3.50. Well, looking at it side by side, it's really not that big of a difference when you're talking about one class. But it's one semester, one class, and their GPA would change slightly. So my question to you is, does it make a difference between a 3.43 and a 3.50? Well, yeah, it does. At Nevada State College, it makes a little bit of a difference. Incoming freshmen would neglect getting $750 towards their first semester. We go on to UNLV, and it becomes even more of a difference. The difference between the Rebel Scholarship and the Excellence Scholarship is quite a bit at UNLV, and it even becomes more magnified at UNR when the difference then jumps to $5,500 in their first semester. That's a lot. So let's just say that a student wants to channel their energies, refine their ideas, and ignite their passions at UNLV and the Honors College. Well, that difference in just that B to the B+ would make a difference in their overall GPA and would cause them not to get into the Honors College. So take a look at this slide here. The grade points that are assigned through NSHE follow a certain pattern. 4.0 is the A, and it goes, if you look at the number after the decimal, 0, 0.7, 0.3, 0, 0.7, 0.3, 0.0, 0.7, 0.3, 0.0, 0.7. So there is a pattern in the way that the numbers are laid out. I'm going to isolate just the B range in the grade point values and show you. Now those terms on the left in colors are my terms, okay? They're not anywhere in NSHE. So I just kind of thought of the 3.0 as the standard because that's what we typically think a B is. And then I added the bonus at 3.3 and the penalty at 2.7 just to show you how that would lay out if you looked at it in visual form. So that's kind of how it would look. You'd have the meaty part of the curve in the center where most of the grade points were 3.0, that you'd have a bump up at 87 and above and a penalty at 83 and below. So I want you to take a look at this grading scale. This is a real grading scale, and carefully examine it for a second. I'll give you a minute here to look at it. I'm going to let you know that there are actually 2 errors in this. See if you can determine what they are. Many of you may have seen that there's kind of a clerical error. I don't think this was intended. It just happened to be something that didn't follow the pattern. You'll notice if you start from the bottom, 2, 6, 9, 2, 6, 9, 2, 6, 9, 3. I think the professor in this class probably just made an error when they recorded that 3 for 93% in the A minus. And the most obvious problem that you may have caught on is I told you at the beginning that Canvas displays student work to the hundredths place, but this grading scale doesn't accommodate that. So basically, you have all these undefined portions of each grade range. So if you're a student that gets an 89.4% in this class, there's questions in your mind as the students. Does the instructor round down? Do they round up? What is my grade in this class? Do I have to wait until grades are posted to actually know? And you know that there are students that are very concerned about their grades, and they're going to probably want to know what their exact grade is prior to you pushing the button and posting that grade. Here's another grading scale that was one that was real, and the numbers in the red were not on that scale. I added them for you so you can take a look and see what the percentages really were. So you saw in the last one that it was 93% was the cutoff for an A and an A minus. This class just happens to jump to 94%. And if you look at that in a distribution standpoint, things change in the grade range. So now the meaty part of the grade range is actually at the bottom, and the standard is a smaller portion than those in the penalty area by just raising the grading scale 1 point. This grading scale is the typical A, B, C, D that you'd see in some syllabi. And one of the things that I thought about when looking at this is when you don't give minuses or pluses, things kind of flip on the grade range like this. So now everybody gets the same 3.0 and gets the same grade points. But think about it, those students that performed at the top of the grade range really got points deducted. So really, let's just take that for example. Somebody with an 80% got the same as somebody that had 89.9% according to this scale. This slide shows a grading scale a syllabus that has no grading scale associated with it. So basically my question is, if that's the case, how is a student supposed to know what grade they've earned in the class? These three are what I consider kind of my Hall of Fame grading scales that I found. And I want you to look at the one on the top left, and I'll give you a second to look at it, see if you can uncover why that one is sort of unusual according to most of the grading scales that you've used or seen. Yeah, so you only get an A in this class if it's 95% or above, and you only get a B, the standard, if you're at 85%. Everything else is a penalty or bonus in the grade range. The next one to your right, top right, is one that's really kind of unusual that I want you to take a look at. In this one, an A is recorded at 97% or above. So everything under 97% gets lower than a 4.0 grade point. B pluses extend all the way to 93% in this class. Now I want you to keep this one in mind, B plus to 93%. This might not be the same as in your grading scale, but just keep this one in mind for a second. We're going to get back to that in just a minute. The one at the bottom, going to be hard to do the mental math on this, but this one, an A minus extends all the way down to 84%. A B in this class, you can get a B with 64%. And remember that first slide I showed you where 36% unanimous, everybody in the groups usually say that that's an F? Well, in this class, a C is earned at 36%. Now, if I'm a student that is researching DMVs, that's the one I'm going to go to in order to try to take my driver's test. So let's get back to the grading scale to the top right. I don't know if you realize this, but approximately 10% of CSN students are still in high school. So in your class, whether you know it or not, you probably have some high school students. Those are kids that are in part of the College of Southern Nevada High School, part of Jumpstart, or other dual credit programs that are run through CCSD. Now let's look at that grading scale. B plus, all the way up to 93%. Well, it really harms the students in high school because CCSD does not record plus or minus grades at all. So when you give a grade of a B plus at 93% and that transfers back to their transcript in high school, that B plus now becomes a B and lowers their GPA to 3.0. Now most people at the beginning of this presentation may have said that 93% is an A minus or an A. Well, that A minus or A in your class or in your mind when it goes back to CCSD lowers their grade point average down to a 3.0 for that class. Does that make an impact? Well, I showed you how the universities impacted. How about the Millennium Scholarship, which requires a 3.25 GPA in order to get $10,000? This next slide I wanted to show you is your chance to be an advisor. A student comes to you in your office after their first year of school at CSN, and they show you their transcript, and it looks like this. First semester, BC, second semester, CB. And the student asks you, Professor, should I continue on in college? Am I smart enough to go on for a second year? Of course, you probably would say, yes. There might be areas that you can improve, but I certainly think you're on the right track. You got a great first year under your belt, and I think you should continue on. Well, there might be a little problem with that biology grade. Let's just say that biology grade, they got 79.4% and this instructor gave him a C. The way it stands, their GPA is 2.48. If that one instructor out of those 8 classes would have recorded pluses or minuses, that one grade in that biology class would have raised their GPA to 2.528. And look at Nevada Promise scholarships. You have to have a 2.50 GPA in order to continue. Now you're not going to go on in your second year unless your GPA is accurate and it is correct. So, grade points have a value. They impact college acceptance, testing thresholds, grants, work study, qualitative measurements for financial aid, satisfactory academic progress, scholarships, and it was something I didn't even realize when putting this together, because the student is mine and he really doesn't have a license. But if a student doesn't have a credit score and they don't have a job and you try to get insurance for them, their GPA makes a difference for what they're going to pay for insurance also. So, for your consideration, should there be a college-wide standard grading scale? I don't know. You think about it. Or should departments have their own standard grading scale? Ours has moved towards this. Or should identical courses have a standard grading scale? I always think about this one is because we've done so much work in our department is trying to align assessments and things like that, and there's so much standardization in how we evaluate the students in our department that not having a standardized grading scale just didn't make sense for similar classes. And the last one is maybe should instructors consider the consequences of their grading scale? And I hope that one's a yes. So I guess now the presentation moves to a little bit towards the persuasive. I just wanted to let you know that all the grading scales that I did show you through this presentation are real. That's atypical students grading, their semester last year. So what is a student to do if they lack the navigational capital to get things changed? Well, I guess they can look towards the policy statement for grade appeals, but there's really nothing that says anything about grading scales. It's designed to maybe appeal things that are not institutionally correct when one instructor grades differently than another instructor, but has no consequences for grading scales that we use across the board. And what kind of worries me is that Standardized testing seems to be on the trend of going away. As a matter of fact, many universities are admitting students now with no SAT or ACT scores considered in their applications. If we go strictly to GPAs, it has to be right, and there probably should be some standardization. You can probably see where there might be issues where there's no standardization in GPAs across different high schools or different colleges across the nation. It just seems to be there would be chances for grade inflation, chances for students not to get in college because of some circumstances going on in their life that cause their GPA to drop. So my question is your grading scale putting students first? I'm going to show you one that I think meets a number of the criteria that we've mentioned here, and it's this one. Now, I want to show you why I displayed it this way. First of all, it accounts for every single number that a student would see in Canvas. I told you at the beginning that their grades are displayed out to the hundredths place. So now we've incorporated that into the grading scale. So there's no ambiguity. The numbers are all on the grading scale. There's no undefined sections of each grade range. Secondly, it aligns with my CSN. My CSN, there is a predefined pull-down menu that is anticipating that you probably are going to have a grading scale that has A's, A minus, B plus, B, B minus. Lastly, it goes back to that pattern that I showed you at the very beginning, 3, 0, 7, 3, 0, 7, 3, 0, 7, 3, 0. And she probably had that in mind when they created or adopted that grade point scale that it gets assigned for your letter grades. So that's the final grading scale that I think works the best. Now, I told you at the beginning, this is informative. It's not intended to persuade you, just to give you some information to maybe have you think about your grading scale moving forward. I wanted to let you know, I promised my son for using such an embarrassing picture of him, I would let you know a little bit about him. The most important thing about him is that he's a great kid. He went to CSN-HS and is now at UNLV. But I wanted to let you know down in the red at the bottom that non-standard grading scales and inaccurate instructor calculations have negatively impacted his GPA on a regular basis. So some of the things that I uncovered while looking at his classes over the time that he was a CSN student is there's no standardization. It just isn't there. There's so many differences. As a matter of fact, I went on to websites like UNLV, Nevada State College, and UNR, and they sometimes publish sample syllabi from some of the professors there, and there's no standardization there either. So we're not unique. It's just there's frankly just no standardization in grading scales anywhere in Nevada. This is one that kind of bugged me. The syllabus grading policy contradicts the actual grading. This is just a thing to take a look in your own classroom. What you put in your syllabi, let's just say, for example, if you say a discussion, discussions are always due on Friday nights at midnight. Please make sure that the way that you set up your Canvas course doesn't change that, one semester based on maybe importing from a previous semester and not changing the grades, because that can inadvertently penalize students. The next one is points available possible are not in alignment. This one was really apparent several times at looking at some of the classes that the atypical student took, is that, let's just say that an instructor said that they were basing their grades on 1,000 points, but when you go to add up all the total projects in the class, only 940 were available. Well, that's severely going to impact the grade point average at the end. This one is a pet peeve of mine: extra credit not set up and calculated correctly. There are many ways to calculate extra credit in a class, and I'll just give you a quick anecdote. The atypical student had a class where he was on the borderline of an A minus and an A. And he has a kind of a pain in the butt father who says never let any extra credit, sit on the table, take advantage of all the extra credit you can. So the instructor gave 7 extra credit assignments worth 1 point each at the end of the semester, and he stayed in on a whole weekend at the end of the semester and finished 5 of the 7. So he got 5 extra credit points out of the 7. When the instructor posted the grade, his GPA actually went down. So the easiest way to record extra credit in Canvas is create an assignment, but when you set the point value on it, just set the point value as 0. So then any points that the student earns, they're adding to their total points in the class, but not adding on to the number of total points they can earn. So that one is man, I found that so many times in classes where the extra credit was not set up correctly. So again, set an assignment, give it a point value of 0, and then when you grade the assignment, just give the students the points that you determine for the extra credit. And the last one is assigning points for non-academic criteria. 2 examples that I wanted to give you happened to actually to family members. I've got 4 people in my family that went to CSN and UNLV, and my middle daughter, who went through a class, and I'm not going to identify what the class is, but I dropped her off. She was a non-driver too, and dropped her off at the class. And when she got back in after the class, she said, "Can we stop for lunch?" I said, "Well, what happened to the 20 bucks that you had in your wallet?" She goes, "Well, I had to give it to the instructor." And I said, "What?" She goes, "Well, you only get an A in the class if you pay for the instructor for the materials." I don't know, that to me, that is not something you want to do in your class. It's even if there is a fee for materials in your class, put it in as a lab fee. Don't don't take money from students. It's just not a good look. So that's this grading scale, I feel, puts students first. I'm available in the education department, and there's my email there. And you can contact me anytime if you have any questions or would like any clarification. I know I ran through that pretty quickly, and I hope it was helpful to you. Best of luck.